Did you ever send a letter to someone and once you placed it in the mailbox, you regretted mailing it? Did you ever dial a phone number and as it was ringing, you started to regret dialing it? As soon as the other person picked up the phone, you hung up right away? Apparently not. Nobody's shaking their heads. I must be the only one. There's this thing we call regret, this gnawing sense in your gut that maybe you shouldn't call or mail or say what is thinking in your head. And now with the advent of social media, this has become a thing for many people. They call it texting regret. Or there's also this thing called sleep texting. Did you ever sleep text? Apparently people text in their sleep, which I don't quite know how you do that. There's an app that you can put on your phone. It's called On Second Thought. And it allows you that when you send a text to somebody, it gives you 60 seconds to change your mind before it actually sends the text. So that you can stop it, edit it, change it, delete it before it's actually sent off. It gives you a grace period, in other words. It helps you from suffering from sender regret. You know, sometimes we shouldn't say what it is that we're thinking in our heads. If I gave this sermon a title, I guess it would be titled, Don't Be So Quick, or Take Time to Have a Second Thought. What we have in the gospel lesson is a continuation, there's my microphone, a continuation of the Sermon on the Plain, which we had at the very beginning last Sunday. And here we have Jesus offering all kinds of teachings, but in particular, 4 examples of possible retaliation. If someone strikes you on the face, if someone takes your coat, if someone forces you to go an extra mile, if somebody begs from you incessantly. The Sermons on the Mount and the Plain teach a lot about personal behavior. When we read the text, we begin to think to ourselves that if we follow these teachings literally, how difficult could that be? Obviously very difficult. If anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other. If anyone wants to take your coat, give your shirt. If anyone takes your goods, don't ask for them back. Give to anyone who begs from you. Now, is Jesus speaking in hyperboles and exaggerations? What's Jesus trying to say? You know, we have these human reactions that well up in us where we want to make an initial judgment against someone who has done something against us, strangers with whom we have an unfortunate interaction. We're quick to make judgments, right? We're quick to make moral characterizations. I think what Jesus is trying to tell us in the 21st century point of view is to have a chance to unsend a text or unmail a letter. Take time to reflect. Don't be so quick to revenge or judgment. Try to find a way of understanding. Try to learn more about somebody and their story. And those are tough teachings. But he's saying, don't be so quick to punitive thoughts. Don't be so quick to judge. Jesus wants to change the narrative from quick and sometimes automatic irritation or anger or hate to understanding, to insight, to grace. We know that when we get angry in the face of someone who's angry, that's often like throwing gasoline on a fire. Jesus is trying to teach us to find other ways to deal with our conflict, to step back, to take time for some discernment. Now, can a person apply these things every day in every interaction, all day long, throughout our lives, with every person that we meet? If you can, you're a saint. And though we are all saints, we're not always saintly. And I think those are the easiest of the teachings, because the hardest he lays out right away. He says, but I say to you that, listen, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. You know, as I said last Sunday in my sermon, Luke presents Jesus as the new Moses, who received his teachings on the mountain from God, came down onto the plain, and delivered his sermon, including these moral codes for his followers. Love your enemies, don't hate them. That's easy, right? A normal reaction to someone who does something hateful to us, and by normal I mean what most people would advise you to do, is to hate them back or to do evil to them. Instead, Jesus is teaching his disciples another way of living and loving. How can we as Christians deal effectively with the people we don't like, or the people that we have conflicts with? It's an issue we deal with every day in 21st century America. These interactions can happen to any of us, in any situation, workplaces, in our families, in our schools, in all of the places that we interact with people throughout our lives. Trying to love everyone is not as easy as it sounds, and I don't think it sounds easy. Hating others is easy, because hating is simply the easy way out. If someone hurts you, someone defames you, someone says something repugnant to you or your beliefs, whether they're political, religious, or secular, the easiest thing to do is to simply let those feelings of hate and disgust well up within you and inside of you. Jesus says, take time, step back, don't be so quick. We take time to think about hate, we soon discover that hating people only inflames the conflict between them and us. Instead of hating one's enemies, Jesus is teaching his disciples the hard way. As such, we need Jesus to help us with this kind of love. We know that Christ can work miracles and perform transformation in conflictive relationships. But it doesn't happen overnight. Jesus says, if someone strikes you on the cheek, turn the other also. From anyone who takes your coat, don't withhold even your shirt. Now, Jesus is saying something pretty profound here about loving everyone, but it's not to be confused with being a doormat Christian. I don't think that's what Jesus means. What he's talking about in this particular part of his sermon is what we would call nonviolent resistance, some kind of resistance that we have experienced throughout the history of this country, especially in the 60s with Martin Luther King Jr. We understood those reactions. They were nonviolent resistance that we came to understand within the culture of what was happening, which means let's try to understand the culture in which Jesus is teaching. First century Palestine. In first century Palestine, a person's left hand was used for very personal issues, like bathroom issues. Which meant you never shake someone's hand with your left hand, you never strike somebody with your left hand. So if you were a master dealing with a slave, you would only discipline your slave by striking them with the back of your right hand, never with the palm of your hand. For some reason that meant you were an equal. Now we live in a society that does not allow striking one another, even disciplining our children by striking them. We don't go up and slap our coworker in the face when they upset us. Though if you watch Alaska State Troopers long enough, you're going to see a part of this world that I don't understand. But it's a picture that Jesus is painting. If someone strikes you on the cheek, if it were a master and their slave, they would use the back of their right hand. For Jesus is talking to victims now. Remember who is in his audience. People who are the poor, the oppressed, the last, the little, the least, the lost. Regularly oppressed and regularly demeaned. So your oppressor would not see you as an equal, therefore striking you with the back of their right hand. On the left side, on the right side of your cheek, of your face. If he tries to strike you again, Jesus says, turn your face the other way, which means turn your face to the right, expose your left cheek. Now, if the person tries to strike you, they cannot, but you can't strike somebody on the left side of their face with the back of your right hand. It's not possible. You would have to turn and use the palm of your hand or use your left hand, neither of which would be done. So by turning the other cheek, you are resisting your oppressor. You're actually humbling them. You're humiliating them without striking back. It's resistance to hate without hating. It's resisting your enemy by standing your ground in humility. The people listening to Jesus would have understood what he said. It's the same thing with giving up your shirt. If your oppressor asks for your coat, this is a bit of a humorous reaction Jesus is giving. This isn't taking your coat and giving your extra one to the coat drive. That's not what Jesus is talking about. He's talking about in first century Palestine, if somebody would ask for your coat, they would be asking it for it in replacement of a debt or repayment of a debt. You owe someone some money, you cannot repay it, you don't have land, you don't have money, therefore your oppressor asks for your coat. There were clear restrictions regarding the payment of debts in the Old Testament. You could not leave a debtor naked at sundown no matter what he or she owed you. If you don't believe me, read Exodus 22:26. Exodus 22:26. You cannot leave a debtor naked at sundown. It just wasn't done in their society. It was against every sense of decency and good order. So Jesus sets up another strategy of resistance. If they ask for your coat, give them your shirt also. You'll be standing there half naked. They'll be forced to deal with this new reality you have put them in. They wouldn't want your shirt because you don't do that to someone, and so they probably would give you your coat back. Do you see the radical teachings of this non-violent resistance that Jesus is advocating? He's not telling people to remain victims, to be doormats. He's trying to teach them new ways to resist evil. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. This was the ethic that moved Martin Luther King Jr. and his colleagues, so many brothers and sisters, to kneel down in the face of water hoses and snarling dogs. Then he thought he was crazy. Evil doesn't know what to do with love and kindness and nonviolence. Evil knows the power of violence. This was something evil hadn't seen before. Victims who refused to be victims. Victims who refused to fight back with violence. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Don't be too impressed with yourself for being good to your friends. Anybody can do that. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them, Jesus says. If you lend to those from whom you have to receive, what credit is that to you? Just when Jesus gives us the golden rule, do good to those as you would know. Do to others as you would have them, as you would want them to do to you. Jesus goes to a far deeper level of how we're to treat our friends. Jesus comes back to the place where he began. Don't be so quick to anger or hatred. Love your enemy. Do good and lend and expect nothing in return. When I think of these words, I think of Jesus' teachings. I think of Emmett Till, who in the early 60s, a 14-year-old visiting Mississippi. He was accused of whistling at a white girl. He was tortured, shot, wrapped in barbed wire. They attached a 75-pound fan to him and threw him in the Tallahatchie River. When his mother saw her son's body, she said, "I want an open casket. Let them see what they've done to my son." It was the ultimate act of nonviolent resistance. The first picture, perhaps, that went viral in this country. The picture of her son's body in its casket. Or we can remember what they did to Jesus, whipping him, spitting in his face, making him carry his own cross until he collapsed, then nailing him to the cross. And there was the mother of Jesus standing, not that far away. What mother could sleep with the images of her son being beaten and stripped and mocked and then nailed to a cross? What sort of people do this to another human being? Love your enemies, Jesus says. Do good to those who hate you. I think of Emmett Till's mother. I think of Matthew Shepard's mother. You remember Matthew Shepard, the gay man who was beaten by men, left tied to a fence overnight to die from exposure. His mother at the trial forgave the men who killed her son. I don't know that I can live up to a gospel that Jesus professes that we are to live every day, but I pray for God's grace in my life, for this is how we can reflect God's love in the church and the community and the world. This is how we witness to the power of the gospel. It's a love that is hard to understand, but it's a love that can change the world. It's a love that can change the world. Amen? Amen. Oh, let's sing. We're going to sing 2 verses of, get to it. Oh, Jesus, I have promised. Do I have the right one? 8:10. 2 verses. We'll sing verse 1 and verse 4.